No one expected this. While the West wrestles with recession, political dysfunction, and mounting debt, a quiet transformation is unfolding just beneath the surface. One that is reshaping entire industries, communities, and supply chains. China, long seen as the world's factory, is no longer just producing for the West. It is acquiring it. Bit by bit, silently and strategically, Chinese capital is buying up ports, farmlands, technology firms, energy infrastructure, and even suburban real estate, not with force, but with patience. And while politicians argue over tariffs and talking points, the economic map is being redrawn. This isn't the dramatic takeover of Cold War imagination. There are no tanks or ultimatums. There are contracts, partnerships, holding companies, and shell corporations. The process is legal, often welcomed, and in many cases even subsidized by the very governments that now express concern. In Canada, in Australia, in the UK, in the heart of Europe and even within the United States, Chinese investments have taken root in places most never notice. Warehouses, logistics firms, mining operations, rare earth processors, power grids, cloud storage centers, all slowly slipping under foreign control. The timing is no coincidence. As Western nations struggle to stimulate growth and attract capital, Chinese investors have stepped in, often offering better terms, faster timelines, and fewer political conditions. At first, it seemed harmless, even beneficial. A foreign company rescuing a struggling manufacturer. A new buyer saving a bankrupt port. A sudden influx of cash revitalizing a local housing market. But over time, the pattern became impossible to ignore. These weren't isolated acquisitions. They were part of a larger design. While Western democracies are distracted by political infighting, China has adopted a long-term economic strategy that few in the West are prepared to confront. State-owned enterprises and private firms, often backed quietly by the Chinese Communist Party, are deploying trillions in overseas capital through a spiderweb of global ventures. In Africa and Southeast Asia, it's labeled the Belt and Road. In Europe and North America, it comes under the guise of investment, partnerships, and win-win development. But the result is the same: dependency. One of the most striking examples is in agriculture. China, with its vast population and limited arable land, has been on a global mission to secure food security. Western farmland, especially in countries like Australia, New Zealand, and the American Midwest, has quietly become the target. Thousands of acres of fertile land have been purchased through subsidiaries. The food grown on this land, in some cases, is not destined for local markets, it's shipped directly to China. And with every new acre, the local supply chain grows more vulnerable to foreign interests. Energy is another front. In the UK, Chinese companies hold significant stakes in nuclear power infrastructure. In Europe, Chinese capital has flowed into wind farms, battery storage, and EV manufacturing. These are not passive investments. They shape policy. They influence regulation. They blur the line between free markets and strategic dependency. And when geopolitical tensions rise, as they inevitably do, these assets become leverage. In technology, the reach is even more subtle. From telecommunications hardware to artificial intelligence labs, Chinese firms have partnered with or acquired startups across Silicon Valley, Canada, and Europe. While some transactions have been blocked on national security grounds, many others slip through regulatory cracks, disguised as innovation deals, joint ventures, or academic collaborations. Data centers storing sensitive information, chip manufacturers producing components used in military hardware, and cloud-based services that handle billions of transactions, all now partly linked to foreign ownership structures that are anything but neutral. And while Western nations debate, stall, and argue over policy, the machinery of acquisition keeps moving. China plays a long game. It does not need to dominate headlines to shift control. It just needs to keep buying when others are selling. Recession in the West, a crisis for most, is an opportunity for Chinese capital. As currencies weaken, debt rises, and governments privatize infrastructure to stay afloat, the buyers waiting in the shadows have already made their calculations. Even real estate tells the story. In cities like London, Vancouver, Sydney, and Los Angeles, housing prices have been driven upward by waves of foreign capital. While domestic residents struggle with affordability, foreign investors, including Chinese nationals and state-linked firms, are purchasing properties not for community, but for leverage. Empty towers, absentee ownership, and speculative development have transformed once vibrant neighborhoods into hollow investments. The social cost is steep, but the market continues, because the money keeps flowing. What's more alarming is the silence. There is no global watchdog tracking these acquisitions in full. Each deal, each partnership, each merger is treated as an isolated transaction. But when viewed together, a different picture emerges, a slow, deliberate accumulation of leverage. Not through conquest, but through purchase. Not through war, but through paperwork. It is a new form of influence, one that sidesteps traditional defenses. And it is working. The West's ability to respond is further limited by its internal divisions. Democracies move slowly. Public debates are messy. National interests collide. Meanwhile, China's state-led model enables coordinated, top-down execution. It can decide where to invest, how much to spend, and how long to wait, all without consulting the public or the press. In this contest of systems, efficiency often wins. And the consequences are beginning to surface. In times of crisis, whether economic or geopolitical, the cost of dependence becomes clear. What happens when a port controlled by a foreign entity refuses access during a conflict? What happens when a data center holding sensitive information is owned by a company loyal to another government? What happens when the land feeding your country is no longer yours? These aren't theoretical questions. They are scenarios already playing out in parts of the world, quietly, but with growing consequences. And yet, most people remain unaware. Because the strategy is not designed to alarm. It is designed to blend in. To look like business. To present as growth. But underneath, it's a shift in sovereignty, not the kind written in constitutions, but the kind that determines who owns the future. China is not conquering the West. It is buying it. Slowly. Patiently. Legally. And every new transaction, no matter how small, brings it one step closer to the kind of influence that cannot be countered with military power or political speeches. Because when the supply chains are owned, the infrastructure is leased, the data is stored elsewhere, and the farmland belongs to someone else, sovereignty becomes a question of ownership, not identity. And as the quiet wave of acquisitions continues, Western governments are beginning to realize just how much ground they've already ceded. But the response is fragmented, inconsistent, and often too late. Individual nations have tried to push back, some passing foreign ownership laws, others blocking high-profile takeovers, yet the underlying system remains exposed. Loopholes persist. Corporate proxies hide true ownership. And local officials, desperate for investment during hard economic times, often welcome foreign capital with open arms, asking few questions. This vulnerability is most apparent at the municipal level. Strapped for cash and facing growing infrastructure costs, many city councils across Europe and North America have sold key assets to stay afloat. Toll roads, airports, water treatment facilities, once considered public goods, are now under foreign lease or ownership. These agreements often span decades. On paper, they may look like public-private partnerships. In reality, they can transfer long-term control over critical services to entities with loyalties far from the communities they serve. And in many cases, the consequences are only understood when it's too late. Price hikes, maintenance delays, data privacy concerns all become flashpoints when control lies in the hands of companies with opaque ties to a foreign government. The public outcry comes only after the deal is done. And by then, the contracts are binding, the influence entrenched. Meanwhile, China is not acting alone. It is building an entire ecosystem of influence, financial, technological, political, designed to secure its position in a world where Western dominance can no longer be taken for granted. State-backed banks provide the capital. Legal frameworks protect the assets. Diplomats ensure political cover. And a global media apparatus helps shape the narrative. This is not merely investment. It's architecture, designed to last and to grow. The Belt and Road Initiative, often viewed as a foreign aid program or geopolitical tool, is also a mechanism for embedding Chinese standards into global infrastructure. Fiber optic networks, digital payment systems, transportation corridors, all built using Chinese equipment, software, and protocols. Once installed, these systems rarely switch hands. They create dependency not just in materials, but in design, in operation, and in long-term maintenance. In dozens of countries, Chinese-built infrastructure now forms the digital and logistical backbone of everyday life. Even within Western alliances, China's footprint is growing. In Europe, for example, Chinese investments in ports, from Greece to the Netherlands to Belgium, have granted access to strategic maritime choke points. In the UK, Chinese funding has touched everything from football clubs to biotech research. And in Canada and the US, partnerships with Chinese universities, companies, and foundations continue under the radar, even as national security concerns rise. All of this is happening while the US and its allies remain distracted. Domestic politics dominate attention. Culture wars absorb media cycles. Economic policy is stuck in gridlock. And while Western leaders debate legislation or campaign rhetoric, long-term economic control slips away in small, legal increments. There are no headlines when a logistics firm changes hands. No public outrage when a battery facility gets a new owner. But over time, the accumulation becomes undeniable. And the most dangerous part of all? It doesn't feel like a threat. There are no sirens. No breaking news. Just contracts. Just money. Just deals, made in silence, buried in spreadsheets, masked by corporate complexity. But when viewed together, they tell a story the West has been too slow to confront, one of strategic encirclement through economic patience. Because in the 21st century, wars are not only fought with soldiers or missiles. They are fought with influence, access, and control. Whoever owns the logistics wins. Whoever controls the data wins. Whoever dominates the infrastructure, the ports, the cables, the energy grids, shapes the rules of tomorrow. The recession has only made the West more vulnerable. Desperate economies sell faster. Struggling businesses accept quieter partners. And each new crisis gives cover to the next quiet acquisition. The public, overwhelmed by day-to-day survival, doesn't see the larger pattern. But Beijing does. And it is betting on a future where power no longer needs to be declared. It simply needs to be purchased. This isn't speculation. It's already happening. And unless Western nations take coordinated, strategic action to protect their core assets, rebuild their industrial base, and rethink their exposure, the shift will continue. Not suddenly. Not loudly. But steadily. One deal at a time.